I may not even use the PowerPoint presentation this morning. What I'm going to do this morning is totally unscripted. In fact, I don't even need to use my tablet. I had not planned for this, but on the way in, I had this, thoughts were going through my head, and I thought, okay, I'm going to need to bring this up. It's related to the study we've been talking about in the last week. Been trying to wrap up the class and study on participating in the political process and the kingdoms of men as far as our involvement. And if you remember, I went through, 14 or so, roughly 14 reasons. I tried to summarize the 7 weeks or so prior what we've covered, and I try to present in this bulleted format the reasons why it's problematic for followers of Jesus to participate in the political system, get involved in it. And then I tried to address the questions that were presented. You saw one of the questions that had to deal with the school board. There were some questions that you all have not seen that have come via Walter through the people online. And I was trying to address those. I've gotten kind of bogged down on it. And in kind of reflecting the school board issue, I just started thinking about the daily readings at the time were of Abraham and Lot. And it just I couldn't ignore how those stories, how they would apply to us today. So what I wanted to do, I don't have, and normally I have slides of scripture readings. I don't have any of that. At the most I got Lisa to write down some verses here. So this is totally unscripted, unplanned, off the cuff. So if it's a little rough, you'll have to forgive me. So, I don't know if Walter, there was this one question about the school board, or something like, is it a sin to vote for school board members or something to that effect? And it was like, is it wrong to serve as a school board member? Is it okay to participate in school board hearings? That was basically the gist, if I'm not wrong, Walter.
Yeah, that's pretty close to it.
Yeah.
And the second part, of course, was saying that that it is a sin or whatever. As parents, should we go to school board meetings and should we express our opinion and say, hey, we don't like these things? Which I think you started saying, no, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we express our opinions all the time. There's no reason to stop when it gets to the school board meeting. You can write your representatives if you want school board. I have no problem sitting in meetings. I don't see what the problem is. The bigger question was, I think, was like, is it a sin to vote in, having these, it's the school board, at least in Virginia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, those positions are actually voted by the citizenry. It's not something like a mayor appoints school board, it's rather the citizens, at least in Virginia, the school boards are determined by the citizenry through some election, how I understand it. And I think that was like, is it a sin to get involved in that? And then we had a discussion last week, a little bit of pushback. I mean, I kind of share some of the problems. If we do accept, if I was somehow the last voice, the one who determines these things, what if I said, okay, it's okay to vote for a school board member? Where would that lead us then? Where would we stop? I kind of raised that dilemma. And there was this feedback that we tell our children that we should make a difference in this world. And the idea was that getting involved in the way our children are raised, what they're taught, that is part of making the difference in this world. And it is valid. Just like I've said, there is some validity to the possibility of making some positive change in the world through the political process. I don't deny that. The thing is, we have to weigh that and consider all the other problems. And like I said, there's like 14, in fact, it's not even.
One thing for you, Phil. For instance, in Hanover County, the school board is appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
The school board is appointed?
Yes, as opposed
by...
to the Board of Supervisors. They pick it out and then the members come together and do
That's
their
interesting.
thing.
I don't know if that's true of every state.
No, it's not.
Okay, that might be where my confusion comes in.
It's a big deal. They're trying to make all school boards elected if they can. But the point being that if you want to influence a school board, you'd have to be a county supervisor.
Okay. But so you would have to, if you're trying to make a change in the school board, then you would have to vote the county administrators into office, hoping that they would then appoint people that you'd want. So I mean, it's almost like kind of convoluted. There is no direct way of making sure the people you want, unless you become involved and become a school board member by approaching a county administrator. I don't know why this is not working. Yeah, I don't know if the battery's dead. I flipped it. Anyway, it's not super important. I just want to count the number of bullet points. Anyway, that point was brought up, and it's a valid point. I'm not trying to dismiss it. But I started thinking, because it was raised while we were doing our Bible readings, anyone who does the daily Bible reading plans, at the time, the angels had come to Abraham, and they were on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it. And there's this negotiation going on. This was the readings at that time last week when this came up, which then led into the story of the angels going to Sodom. And I just couldn't help but thinking, well, what if this was an issue in Sodom or in Lot's days? I thought, how would this play out? And is there anything we could learn from those stories to help us guide us today? So that's what I was going to try to do today. I wanted to read some from Genesis. Let me get my phone here. This is Genesis 18. So Abraham is standing before one of the quote-unquote angels, and he's negotiating, bargaining, how you want to describe it. He's starting, whatever, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, and I get down to 10. And Abraham said, "Oh, let the Lord not be angry, and I will speak just once more." And this is Genesis 18, verse 32. What if 10 are found there, referring to Sodom? What if 10 are found there? And he, the angel, said, "I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. And when he finished speaking with Abraham, Yahweh departed, and Abraham returned to his place. So that's the lead up into chapter 19. You might want to turn there in preparation. Before I get there, when I think about making a difference in the world, there's a couple verses that might come. You're a city on a hill. You're supposed to be a lampstand. You don't put it under a bushel. And then there's the one from James. There's also the salt of the world. The interesting thing about the salt of the world, back then, they weren't using sodium chloride. I think if that's what the chemical, I don't know, whatever the chemical was. They were using a different type of salt, which actually could lose its saltiness. And Jesus said, even though we're supposed to be the salt of the world, we got to be careful that we don't lose our saltiness, because if we do, we will be good for nothing, except for to be thrown out and to be trampled underfoot. The question is, how could we lose our saltiness? That's one thing that you keep in the back of mind on this matter of making a difference in the world. We're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. We're supposed to be salt, but we could possibly lose our saltiness. Questions we should be asking ourselves, how can we lose our saltiness? If we become like the rest of the world, have we lost our saltiness? Yes or no? But the verse that came to my mind was from James chapter 1, verse 27. When I think about trying to make a difference in this world. And it reads, religion that is pure and undefiled before our God and Father is this: to care for the orphans and widows in their hardship. Yeah, we can make a big difference in the world. If you go back to the 2nd century Christianity, Christians were not politically active. They weren't serving in the military. They were not holding positions of power. They're being persecuted. They were minority in a pagan world, with the exception of maybe the Jews and Judaism. So they're in an ungodly world. And what do they do to make a difference in the world? They care for the sick. They care for the children that are thrown out, that are unwanted. They protest against the violence of their day. That's how they went about making a difference in their world. They did not seek positions of military or political power. They thought this was going to be a corruptive influence to the body of Christ. I said, I don't know if it was last week, I said it's great to know the Bible, it's fantastic, it's important to know the Bible. But if we're ignorant of Christian history, and we're kind of walking half blind, if we don't know how we got to where we are today, why the name Christadelphian is on our sign outside, we're in danger of losing our identity and saltiness as Christadelphians. Robert, I think you told me the story about somewhere down the street, there's a Jewish synagogue, and they've taken off, did you say like they've taken off all identification marks that would identify that building as? Okay. Now they're doing that, I assume they're doing that because of the anti-Semitism, which we'll eventually get back to that topic one of these weeks. But when you mentioned that, the first thing that occurred to my mind is, could we get to a point where there's no reason even to have the name Christadelphian outside on our sign? It would just be the Richmond Chapel. That we lose our identity and saltiness. And how would that happen? So all these things are going through my mind, but I haven't even finished. No one mentioned that I haven't finished James 1:27. Religion that is pure and undefiled before our God and Father is this: to care for the orphans and widows in their hardship. So I'm all for making a difference in the world. Let's go out. Let's try to help people, find people that we can help. That's wonderful. When we do the RVA Light, we try to help other people. But it goes on to say, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. To keep oneself unstained from the world. The question we have to deal with when we are talking about whether we should get involved with school boards, with local politics, national politics, is there the danger that we will become spotted by the world? And that's my concern. I'm not here to tell you that voting for someone on the school board or county administrator or whoever appoints it is sinful. I'm not going to go there. I'm just trying to warn us, where can we get to the point where we lose our saltiness, our identity, that we become stained by the world? Every one of us has to make that decision. You may not agree with what I'm saying and been presenting. That's fine, okay? But this has to be in the back of our mind all along. And this leads to why I'm thinking about, let's talk about Sodom. Let's talk about Lot. And what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, and what happened to Lot and his family, and why it happened. Before I go there, I want to give credit where credit's due. After class, David, you and I were talking about the subject that were brought up, and I never even thought about this as being one more. We could probably put this up as another bullet point. The idea of being of one mind. Being of one mind. It came up because I said, okay, let's say I give authorization, I give my stamp of approval for whatever it's worth. We can participate in local elections or school board meetings, getting people onto the school board. Let's say we can do that. I gave you endorsement. The question is, where's the line going to be drawn? What about local at the county level, the state level, the national? Where do you draw the line? Why, there is nothing in Christadelphia where you have a pope or a pastor that says, this is our stance here in this meeting. We don't have that. Each of us pretty much uses the scriptures to guide us and direct us. What happens when Rob says it's okay to vote in this condition, but David says, no, that's not right, okay? And Ellen, you say, well, there's nothing wrong with voting in a state election because there's no military component to that. Well, I guess you could say there's state guards and state police and so. Each of us will then come up with our own determinants as to when we can vote, when we can participate, at what level, where do we... Is this being of one mind? And I decided to look at these verses. It occurred to me, one mind, one mind. I'm pretty certain in the New Testament we're going to find references to one mind. So bear with me as I try to bring these up. 1 Corinthians 1:10 is the first one. All right, 1 Corinthians 1:10. Now I urge you, brothers and sisters, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be made complete. Made complete. How? By having the same mind and by the same judgment. Having the same mind, same judgment. Jacob, you want to say something?
Something along that line of having the one mind, because we do not have the Pope, because we do not have some sort of spiritual leader that says this is, as a community, a voting block of how we're going to vote. It also results in the fact that even personally, we have different levels of between the Democratic Republic or even a third party where we have more of affinity to some of their stances and thoughts of how they want to run the government. And that would further divide our community as we were to break down into, I'm for, let's say, Harris, or I'm for Trump, or I'm for Robert Downey Jr., or like whoever ends up running for a political party. There is going to be that opportunity for us to no longer hold a pleasant conversation with each other because of the fact that we've now seen that, oh, that person voted for so-and-so instead of my preferred candidate. Therefore, I'm going to have a higher likelihood of not wanting to be together with them.
All right. Well, you remember in the round table, we can call that you had with those four other young people, the only time, and you can correct me, but at least what was released, the 40 minutes or so, whatever it was, that was released, the only time where I saw everyone agreed was on this issue that it's a good thing Christadelphians don't vote because it avoids having divisions that raise up because of our differing political views and stances in this world. That everybody, it was the only time where everybody agreed. Now, I'm sure that probably they agreed elsewhere, but we only got 1 hour or so less in that video. But that's the point. And, you know, we get into the political, we start bringing the political world into our ecclesia, into our body. We're only asking for trouble. We're only asking for divisions to occur. So this is not the only place Paul advises and urges us to be of one mind. Romans 15, verse 5. All right, I'm going to go to verse 4. We know this almost by heart. For whatsoever was written previously was written to teach us that through perseverance and through the encouragement of the scriptures we would have hope. And then this is the verse I want to focus on. Now, may the God of perseverance and encouragement grant you to be of the same mind with one another in accord with Christ Jesus. That this is something that God's supposed to give to us as a blessing for us to be of one mind. And then Philippians 2, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if any comfort from love, if any fellowship based on the Spirit, if any compassion or mercy, then make my joy complete by, how? Having the same mindset, having the same love, and being united together with one soul, one mind. this is why, I'm very leery of politics finding an entranceway into the Christadelphian community, because it is bound to create division somewhere. And we have enough that divide us as it is. We don't need yet one more temptation. So that as a kind of a preface or lead-in to Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. So let me get back to Genesis, wherever I left off. All right, Genesis 19. So the story is, and again, I have no slides. All this is off the cuff. In Genesis 19, and the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Now that's very important. It wasn't just like a random thing. Lot just happened to be, going out for a stretch, and he happened to be nearby the gate. It was a happenstance, and the two angels walked. No, sitting in the gate is a term to describe what judges do. If you wanted to judge a case, have it heard before, the citizenry, you would go to the city gate, and the elders, those who sat at the gate, would judge various matters. So right away, this tells you that Lot was in a very high position, respected, but he's up there. Maybe he's a county administrator, maybe he's the administrator of Sodom, but he's definitely not just your average Joe, blue-collar worker. So it's the first thing I wanted to highlight. Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom, and I think this will come up later. Lot saw them and rose up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the earth. And he said, "Behold now, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house, spend the night, wash your feet, then you can rise up early and go on your way." But they said, "No, rather we spend the night in the city square." Anyway, going forward, the men, so they take up Lot's offer, go to Lot's house, and then verse 4, before they lay down or go to sleep, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people, to the last man, surrounded the house. And they called out to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can know them sexually." But Lot went out to them to the entrance and shut the door behind him. And he said, "Please, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold now, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them whatever is good in your eyes. Only do not do anything to these men." Couple things here. What is Lot doing calling the people of Sodom brothers? Another thing is, what is Lot posing as an alternative to these guests being taken out and whatever they're going to do to them? He offers his own daughters. Is that the right thing to do? How much of Sodom may have worked its way into Lot's thinking when he posed the alternative, "Here, you can have my daughters. Do whatever you want with them." Verse 9, but they said, the people who were trying to get in, they said, "This one," referring to Lot, "came as a sojourner, and he is behaving like a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Now, you might say I'm going a little bit too far because they say he's behaving like a judge. I don't know if other translations might have a different take on that. Let me see if I've got.
The New King James says, "This one came in here to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge."
He's acting as a judge.
As this was the first time he'd been doing something like this, where he was trying to address.
So the question, what I'm trying to think of, were they some way affirming his high position at the gate, or is this just simply what you're doing right now is judging me? The way it's reading here, it sounds like the latter. Of course, he's acting like a judge, yeah. You know, maybe because he thinks he sits at the gate and judges cases that he can, in fact, be a judge at this moment. But the angels blind these men, and they go on to say, verse 12, the men have said to Lot, or these angels, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and all that you have in the city? Bring them out to this place, for we're about to destroy this place because the outcry against them is so great before the face of Yahweh that Yahweh has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were takers of his daughters, so I guess he had other daughters, and said, get up, get out of this place, for Yahweh is about to destroy the city. But in the eyes of his sons-in-law, he was as one who was joking. What kind of influence was Lot having in Sodom, in his exalted position as one who judges at the gate? What kind of change was he making in Sodom at that time? Remember, what was the number that eventually Abraham and Yahweh came to an agreement on? 10. So we know that there's less than 10. We know we've got Lot, we've got Lot's wife, we've got the 2 daughters, that's 4. So somewhere between 4 and 10. And the question is, how much influence was Lot having as a man exalted at the gate? What was the influence? What was his mark on the world or in Sodom? Not a whole lot. Rob, you're shaking your head. Don't hurt yourself. Jacob?
Something along that lines. When you think about the fact that Abraham had at least 400 men available to him, and there was enough of a situation where Lot and Abraham had to split because of their livestock and the men that they had, you would have thought that there would have been a deeper level of effect that Lot would have had on his men, because that's what you see with Abraham and what he has an effect on his servants, to the point that when his master servant goes up to get Rebekah, he's actually praying to God because of the level of faith that he has seen in his master Abraham.
Right. So your point being that Abraham, being out in the desert, wherever by himself, living a nomadic life, he's got a large group of people who will do and listen, obey what he says to them. But in contrast, Lot can't even get his sons-in-law, and by implication, his daughters who had married these sons-in-law, he couldn't have any influence to convince them that this God of Abraham, Yahweh, was real and this threat was real. So, yeah, Rob, you're shaking your head correctly. He's having very little influence as far as I can tell, David.
So, some people have speculated that, when Abraham was saying, well, would you spare it for 50? Would you spare it for, he keeps working it down, he gets it down to 10. Some people have speculated that Lot literally had 10 members of his own family in that city. And so that's when he stopped, because he says at least Lot's family would be righteous,
Right.
And
so maybe it would have been Lot's wife, the 2 daughters that were unmarried, the 2 daughters were, or at least 2, because it's plural.
Right, at least
2 daughters and their husbands. That would get you roughly 10.
That gets you 8, and then it also talks about his sons, plural. So that would be 2 more.
I missed that part.
Yeah, so 2 sons, 2 daughters that were married, the 2 husbands, and then the 2 daughters that are unmarried, that's 8, and then Lot and his wife would be 10. So if Lot had just taken care of his family,
that's important. It's like Lot failed at even getting the world out of his family. At this moment of crisis, it turned out it was just those that were in that house that got out of Sodom alive. And Lot, with all his wealth and power and prestige, had essentially zip influence in Sodom. And I kind of thought, well, let's pretend. I mean, I told Lisa this and she kind of laughed. So, well, let's say there was a public school system in Sodom, okay? And Lot had to get the votes to become a school board member. And his goal was to get any references to homosexuality out of the books, out of the library. He wanted to ban the teaching of more than one God. This was his goal in running for a school board position. The problem is, if you have to vote, be voted into that position, where are you going to get the votes to do that, accomplish that? Because everybody is ungodly and doesn't want to hear about the God of Abraham. They're fine with homosexuality. So where are you going to get the support that you need to be able to be put in that position to start with? Anyway, it was just like a crazy thought. There wasn't a public school system in Lot or Sodom. But that is kind of like the predicament. Maybe we could argue whether today is the equivalent of the days of Sodom. Some of us might say yes, some would say, well, we're not there yet, I don't know. But it's just some of the wild thoughts that came to my head when we got into this topic about the school board, and I put it in the context of the readings that we had last week at the time, which was Genesis 18 and Genesis 19. So I dreamed this up on the way down as I was driving from Fredericksburg. I appreciate you hearing me out on this. Questions, John?
Not to deviate at all from any of this, but I think you made a pretty good case for the fact that I think we should see ourselves in Lot, because here's a man his life is just a series of bad decisions, and the Lord has provided over and over opportunity. It's amazing that the Lord even wants to save this man and goes to the extent that he does, because first of all, he ends up in this area out of greed, because when he separated from Abram, he was given the first choice, and he chose out of greed the luscious, most prosperous place, which was prosperous by men's standards, not by the Lord's. And he entrenches himself in there, and then he gets taken away by this northern invasion, which was really an opportunity for him to realize this is really time to go. This is from the Lord. And he goes right back, and he gets deeper and deeper entrenched to the point where he is, in this position of power and influence in an absolutely decadent place that's so bad that the Lord wants to wipe it off the map. And he's in a position of, influence in this. He's totally convinced himself that he can be in these two totally opposed environments, and he still he's making bad decisions, offering his daughters when these are angels, and he should trust that they're there to save him. He doesn't need to save them. And then his wife looks back. I mean, he's just, I see myself and my relationship with the world in this. So
Yeah.
for what it's worth.
And then, of course, it didn't stop there. When he got out to the cave, went to the little Zoar, and then he went to a cave, and then his children came up with this incestuous plan. Like, there's no other men on the face of the planet, yeah, right. So it didn't even stop with Lot's wife turning back. And remember, Jesus warned us, remember Lot's wife. Well, what were we supposed to remember about Lot's wife? What is the lesson? Jacob, and I think also Walter had his hand up at some point.
Just 2 points. One, we do know that at least with Lot, his soul was vexed by the evil that we see, and that he saw because of what the New Testament tells us. Another aspect that not even having to deal with the idea of being involved in political involvement with the world, you think back on Samuel. Samuel is a wonderful prophet, great spiritual head, and he does a circuit as a judge around Israel, and his whole point is to try to judge the nations. What's interesting is, after him, his 2 sons cannot seem to uphold the same level of spiritual values that he has done, just within the idea of trying to be a spiritual leader within his community. I think there is also a lesson for that, is that as fathers, as in people who are trying to raise a spiritual family, we cannot put the preeminence of doing good as spiritual heads and spiritual leaders for the community above trying to raise our own godly seed. And that was a lesson that I think you can see in almost every instance throughout the history of the kings and of the prophets and of the judges, is that you cannot want to search out for those high prominent positions by man's standards, because that can be detrimental to your own family.
Yeah. What's even sadder about the story of Samuel and his children, we're no longer talking about dwelling in Sodom. This is supposed to be the nation of Israel, called out by God, a holy nation, and yet you can see even in that called out state, you have the risk of corruption coming into the body of Moses, into the people of God. It's still a danger and a threat that we can corrupt our ways by turning our ways to, or eyes upon, prosperity, what we call the things of this world. Walter, you might get the last word here, I think.
This message came in for us, but while you're thinking about that, to clarify, when you set at the gate, this is not a politically appointed position. The gate was where all the elders and the respected people met and would sit around, and people would bring their problems to them and get a consensus. Well, what does the law say about this? And everybody would talk about it. So in this case, we have him sitting with the gate with everybody else, but then they say to him, wait a minute, you think you're one of our elders? You think you're one of us who can rule on these kind of things? And the population's obviously saying, no, Lot, sorry, no. Great thing you think about there, but you're not one of us, is what they're saying. So he's kind of bringing himself into their culture, into their way of thinking. Because you'll see other accounts in the Bible where the elders were at the gate, and some people wanted to be seen at the gate, and you can remember some things from Esther and other places that kind of thing happened.
Wasn't that what Absalom was up to? He would be at the gate and he would like lament, oh, if I had the power to do something. Again, I'm not arguing that sitting at the gate was a democratically appointed position. I wasn't going there. If it is in fact something that the community keeps you or puts you there, it still begs the question, why are the people of Sodom seeing Lot as a good, you're like one of us, so, I want to be there, we respect your judgment. I mean, it's kind of like, we already know that the judgment of the people of Sodom is pretty low. Did Lot have to lower himself to their standards in order to kind of get to that position? I mean, it does raise some other question, like, how did he get to that place where he was respected among his community, that he would be allowed to hear these cases that are brought forward? Anyway, we're running out of time,
Yeah.
so I appreciate everybody's input.